Good afternoon and most welcome to H 967. This would be repeating in a bit, a reintroduction of fractal memory. We've spoken earlier about Carl Pribram, Dave F. Peat, Gribbings, and of course the couple in arms, Penrose and Stuart Hameroff. Fractality is what is the term for the day in memory, neurology, brain understanding, so to speak, and it makes a difference. And I will try to, which is very hard because it's impossible to criticize the old model because it's partly right, but it's also partly wrong. And it could send us off into the wrong territory when it comes to memory. Let me introduce this drawing here and think of this as the actual memory, what happened, and what is around it that is non-memory, not memory, not what happened. That's a start, that's the first thing. Think about that for a while, and then try to remember what we mentioned many times ago about symmetry. That an object remains the same even if you turn it around. You can rotate and it will be the same if it's a square. If it's a cube, you can rotate it in several directions at the same time. It still will be the same. You can also reverse and the thing will be the same if it's symmetrical. You can also do reflecting, which actually, when I wrote it, I thought it was really interesting because we'll be speaking about mirrors. And I'm quite certain that is not unimportant. You can also do something called transponding. It is when I see something from an angle, like this book, it won't look like a book. Sorry to say it. It would look like something that is twisted, have things going out in different ways. It looks odd. That is transponding. Things remain the same, and that goes for memory as well. So you can see here, this is like half a step into fractality, how it works. And by the very idea of having a memory and then having that surrounded by no memory or non-memory, it is very close to this. Yes, memory, no memory. It is a preemptive stop here. And that is one factor. Another factor is this idea that these things, if we start with these things, which is already a little bit problematic, then think about a computer. And I would say until 10 years ago, all neurologists were describing memory as a computer thing, even our cognition as a computer thing, which didn't really make sense at the time, something that Gibbons pointed out. Gibson, it's his name. Might be the most important because it really showed the absurdity in that idea. I think about memory as a computer memory. And there, these things stored. This gets the number 1 as memory, and this gets number 0 as non-memory. And then in order to take those things out of the memory bank, you need a CPU, and you need a working memory, a ROM. And so you have to look around in the archives, you have to find them, how you get this idea that you maybe arranged your memories in a certain order, or they, even worse, arrange themselves in a certain order. Like in linear time. So if I want to remember 2021, 1st of June, I have to go back, like the computer stepped all the way back. I would say this idea is completely disastrous. There is no indication that our brain or our memory works like this. None. Zero. And this is the general perception. oddly enough, that is also the perception of this book. For obvious reasons, because that is what we think about memory, all of us, if you don't go into neurology. Fractality works quite different. Hologram, you remember that? It means that every little piece of your brain has the whole thing in it. And that maybe it's a good start to think about the thing. And that means that this needs to be broadened a bit. Of course, there are some parts of the memory that are more real and some are less real. But thinking of this sharp dividing line, preemptively, a priori, will bring about problems. And it's no wonder people who have this perception very strongly will not remember. It is as simple as that, for obvious reasons. How can you enter something that is fractal by using something that doesn't really fit? This seems to be something we inherited from the Greek. This is of a new data. And I don't think for a second that there is a coincidence that, especially since the advent of computer, our memory's gone down significantly. Also caused by the misunderstanding within educational system. So listen to this. Finally, I found something I can really criticize and kick on. This is this word executive function. This is actually from psychology, even if it sounds very technical. It is the automatic machinery inside our head that takes out memory, and it could be damaged, according to psychology, and in neurology until 10-15 years ago. It's absolutely absurd. There is not a hint of passivity in taking out memories. It's absolutely dependent on how much you send in. Remember, fractality is dependent on what you do. You need to intend memory. Memory doesn't come by itself. It's all dependent on your fractal horizon. Remember the hermeneutics. You need to send out actively an idea what is. And then you hit the actual memory. So you get two event horizons meeting. And in this you get memory. There is no Platonic reality to that one. There's no Platonic reality to that one. They don't refer to something somewhere else in transcendental outside world. You see here, this is aletheia and theia. Heidegger had a point. In a way, you could say that he understood fractality before Benoit Mandelbrot. And you also see how it helps other people. We understand this already, but how to tell poor other people about Heidegger's aletheia theia? You can remember it. As I have a couple of friends I discussed this thing with, and they remember it and they can tell about it, but they cannot understand it. Because this idea blocks out the understanding preemptively, the deeper understanding. All of a sudden we have quite a different way of getting into aletheia and theia, to see how thing comes up in the readout here, the meeting of two differences, two radical differences, and the more different they are, the better it is, because more energy is stored in difference than in non-difference. Lack of energy is sameness, sameness and only sameness, sameness without difference. Then you don't get much memory. So it's quite another take on thinking about representationalism. And this is what makes fractality so good. You understand already in the lectures that understanding of fractals is also fractal. It's fractal in both ways. So we need to go from different angles to understand it. And once you can add all these, you can realize it would be so much easier to access your memory. All this turning, reversing, reflecting, transponding, this is what you can do with your memory. And you can reach into your memory much more deep and wide. And this is oddly the case, although I thought to the very difference that natural people, primitive people, or hunter-gatherers, that I prefer to call them, their memory is incredibly acute. They don't forget, simply don't forget. So I think once more it's a matter of the hen and the egg, which came first. It is impossible to say, but both things are affecting. The idea we have of our working subjectively, the idea of an outside world, a world at lost, at large, perspective from nowhere, all this will affect your capacity to be active. The idea of a world out there will make you passive. You will sitting in the theater and then something happens. It's very hard to be active when you're watching the television, for instance. You can, but it's tough. Not a good way to start. Therefore, in the beginning, memory will be rather painful. And this is actually something Ribbing describes. He himself, he was not remembering anything, and he thought it a problem, and then he started to try it out. He must have had some intuitive understanding of fractality, because the speed he progressed can only be explained by an intuitive understanding of how fractal memory works. And that there is a motion in it. How we are balanced is absolutely important. I mentioned that before. When we try to remember, we do retention. We go a little way back, at least in Western cultures. We do it physically. And when we do futuring, we try to go forward. It's not a matter of millimeters, it's less than that. But it's here in the neck. It's a slight pulling forward, it's a slight pulling backward. And having a pull down, this will make it almost impossible to do retention, do pasting. It will also make it almost impossible to reach planning, futuring. Both those gets severely affected. And if you ask a person to slouch considerably and tense their neck, they won't remember and they won't be able to do planning. This is one of the reasons when you ride a horse, there's a shackle in the horse's mouth. You want to stop it, you take away the balance between the head and the neck. It will stop. It will do as you say. It's a forceful way of demanding to the horse. Of course, you don't actually stop it. This is what I thought when you were little. I thought what the rider did when they took the shackle and pulled it, stopped the horse. But you can't stop the horse, you're sitting on it, so you can't really stop it. What you stop, it's the possibility for the horse to decide for himself. This is what you do. And I'm also thinking about that horrible way of punishing people in old China, the kange. That was a big lump of wood or place on the neck of the person. And the most horrific thing was these people could no longer decide for themselves. It weighed like 10 kilos. At the end of the day, you had to slouch. And you lost your willpower. That was the tough punishment. And if you had it for more than a week, you would lose your willpower for a year henceforth, if you ever recaptured it. So you see how important the balance is. When we lose balance, we so directly go into the lack of planning, lack of retention. And this is the reason we human beings bend our necks when we listen to orders. We did it in the military. We can do it if a police officer tells us strongly. Bend our necks. We listen. We become obedient. So there is a political dimension to this as well. Modern human beings are so used to passivity, so they even regard their own perception of your organs as completely passive. They sort of go hand in hand. The passivity coming from the outside world gives a passivity in the body. in the sensing organs. Get up, get out of yourself. And all of a sudden you can do planning and you can do retention. And active memory is quite different. I mentioned before, passive memory makes memory either be something you want to forget, something distasteful, last week's too salty soup, or bad experience in the traffic 3 days ago on the bridge going from the mainland to the island where I live. But it could also be a nice memory. But also the nice memories in this passive view has a negative content. Why? Well, because they belong to the past, not any longer there. It's an absence. I miss the chicken I had just minutes ago. The taste linger on in my mouth. I want to have it back. In a passivity, that's a negative thing. It actually makes me a little bit depressed now. I eaten my chicken. But in an active attitude, it is always a source of something positive. And I would say that the fractal knowledge, once you sort of locate yourself, when you become fractal, both things, both the bad memories and the good memories, stop to be polarized in that way. So you don't have these categories like marsupial and mammals. You don't have that categories bad and good memories. They are all material you can use. They are, just like the coast of Norway, a fractality. And all of a sudden, one can even question the idea of good and bad memories or experiences. Because they are all grounds for learning. And they are grounds for something that is permanent. Because in this model, we don't have permanence. Maybe one of the most gruesome complaints in modern time is that we feel that we are not persistent egos or selves. We constantly become new, depending on what hits the eye passively or what thought passively occurs in our head on this ludicrous of function is not active. It's just passively doing the things and putting up memories I don't like. I think that happens to all of us. A thing popping up in your head, you don't want them there. And the idea of an executive function makes that worse, much worse. The fractal idea makes it possible for you to actively engage in your memories. Yes, if you go further, you will find memories that are more or less obviously bad, but even those can be met. Whereas the etiquetting we do with the memories, saying those are bad, makes the problem worse. Something I can also sort of think about today when I have a headache. Trying to make the headache into an object and getting rid of it makes it much more persistent to come up all the time. Also something we found in the study of pain. A person who doesn't acknowledge the pain, wants to get rid of it, will suffer more because they objectify the pain and they can no longer meet the pain. And not meeting the pain, that means that you have no control of it, but you don't enter into it. You make it an outside object. If there were an attacking bird here, like a seagull, for some instance, that got locked up in this room, it will attack me. I have no power of that. The same will be memories that are external in this inward way. The memories are put into the archive. Just the same as in the libraries, there are bound to be bad books there with contents that you should avoid. I will in next lecture bring up one of those books. And they could actually affect you in a bad way, possibly. I wouldn't say that the risk is really big, but for the example, they could actually, in a quite negative manner, affect you. But that is only so long that you make it into an object. And how many people doesn't suffer from pain these days? I have a pain in my neck, I have pain in my back, I have pain in my elbow. We make those two objects, and thereby we lose control. We don't enter into it anymore. And the same goes for memory. The pain example was to show how memory works. Once you go into the memory, you're being active, you do retention in a very active way. And this is mentioned by Ribbing. He said, why don't you put extra special effects to your memories? You want to remember that antithesis is the opposite of thesis. Don't just say to yourself, one thing is thesis, the other one is the opposite. Think about them completely different. Thinking of thesis as a dog maybe, but antithesis as something completely different. Not even an animal. Maybe a cup of chai latte or something really rare you've never tried. Then it will stick. But putting them in opposing pairs will make it harder to reach into memory. Can still be reached. But this way of going about classifying memories, it's too general. Look, this is exactly how it is. How I draw it. Compare that to the fractality. That is a complexion. The degree of complexion makes it easier to access. And I made that mistake myself. I'm a logician from the beginning. And I try to remember logical propositions in opposite pairs. It's very tough. It's almost impossible. But once a teacher actually told me, she was herself completely analytical, but she said, I don't remember it that way. One pair has completely set of properties, but the other pair I gave something out of the blue. And she said she uses angels and demons, this game, I don't know if you're familiar of it. And she could give, for instance, not P, could be the demon Sex, I think, was one of the demons in the game. But P, a positive P, she doesn't give a demon name at all. She gives, for instance, maybe her favorite dog, Carl. I think this is exactly the example she showed me once. And then I understood, yeah, I've been trying to store logical things in a logical manner is counterproductive. And now it's a professor of logic telling me that. Then I listened. I'm a very stubborn person. And then all of a sudden I could remember all these huge lines of logic. I put in something that was extra special. Saying this is opposing, it's not a good lead for a fractal memory. It doesn't help. It's way too simplified. And actually, look at this. It also holds for D and not D. You have the very same thing. How do you discern? They're very tough. Even if you use this model, you can understand it's very tough. That's why you don't have to abandon it. You need to more or less go into it and expand it and see what you can do with it. But as only this model, it's no good.
Charon is perhaps the name of a dog, but it's also the name of the ferryman. Who take it as also, it's a demon in a way.
Yeah, those things happens. But actually, when you said that, I both have the dog and Carol. And that means that's very good, Kalle, very good, Kalle, excellent. Now all of a sudden an extra fractality entered. So although it sounds on the, that you changed the whole history, you did not, you added actually here. And now it's bound to stick. You see how it works here. First you establish one thing, then you establish another one. And even by saying that there are antitheses, they will come easier now, because you have gotten exactly what Susie Froebel explained, delta T depth. This is why she is so brilliant. So although at some level I will have the antithesis of demon or something similar. But at a deeper level, still be the dog, and the dog will be different from the demon. This is fractality. And this is how we see our working. And fractality doesn't either accept an absolute externality. This was why I've been talking about endogenous, exogenous, those cumbersome words. But they are there for a purpose, for you to understand something has more the tendency of being outside and some things have more the tendency of being inside. But sameness and difference goes here too. And you will be able to distinguish more what is on the outside and what is on the inside once you deepen delta T. You will gain more knowledge, and there is no knowledge lost at all. You can actually keep this model. And you can keep this one as well. You're just going to be on a higher level here maybe. There is no loss here. In fractality is no loss. It's gain wherever you come. So bad memories and good memories can help each other. And of course there's going to be real tough memories, but I think this can actually have an effect. Well, I already know, actually, to be honest. I already read some, and good effect in treating people with bad memories. Maybe you had a bad experience when you were young. Maybe you fell off the horse, which happened to a friend of mine. She fell off the horse. She broke her back and so forth. This could help to process this, because you are bound to see that as a negative thing. It's gruesome, falling off the horse. And the old saying was, get back on the horse directly. Well, if you've broken your back, you can't do that. She couldn't get up until 8 months later, and then it was too late. Already this bad memory, good memory was established, and that affected her. And when she's affected, also the horse is affected. Because you that have been riding, you know every little emotion you have in yourself will affect the horse. It's two horizons that meet, and are you insecure, the horse will be insecure. Are you really insecure? Oddly enough, the horse will try to cast you off. You can see the counterproductivity. There's a little bit, I heard a couple of weeks ago, I have this horrendously big bag. It is really big. If you fly, you're familiar with the lower priced companies now, they allow only a bag that fits with a certain size or weight. And they usually has a box when you check in, your bag should fit here. My bag do fit under the seat, but it doesn't fit that little small area. I need to push it and everything. And once we were standing in the line now, somebody says to me, are you sure that's going to fit into the box? I don't think so. Have you thought about that? Hello, we were already in the line. Why say that? That could only make me nervous. It was too late anyway. And if you get nervous, you're bound to cause attention from the personnel. Your flickering eyes or your nervous attitude. So I managed to forget it, and that person was supposed to know about human beings. I don't think so. It's just ludicrous. It is like you have to jump over a cliff to save your lives, and somebody stops you and say, are you sure you're going to manage this? Are you sure you can't fall? Have you seen how far down it is? If you only have these models, they are bound to cause a bad effect, which is very obvious. And I think modern education system is a little bit like that. They will tell you the bad stuff, and they won't tell you how to cope with them. And maybe if you really should, like associate, how about how they treat young children today? They try to spoil them with not having any bad experience. Is that really spoilage? I wonder. I don't think so. I think that could actually cause them to be horrendously weak when it comes to their time to really face horrible things. And that's an absolute disfavor. A little bit like saying, are you sure that bag is going to fit? I couldn't even see the purpose of the comment. It didn't make any sense. Why don't you get scared now? Maybe that could help the situation. Yeah, I think trying to be a bit psychological, her idea of the whole thing is if you worry, that could have a positive effect. This is actually not so weird as it sounds. Big investigations a couple of years ago show that people usually think if I worry about things and nothing happens, that shows it was good to worry. I think here we don't do this important difference between inside and outside. It doesn't have to worry about things you don't have any control of. But the whole idea that is so prevalent today to too early on make this too sharp a difference between inside and outside will hinder our understanding of what is really on the outside, because that's fractal. And all of a sudden we don't have that fantastic pattern, and these things goes into each other. And there's a mixture. And all of a sudden you can start thinking, that person looking angrily at me. Actually, it did actually happen a couple of years ago. Somebody was looking angrily at me. And in the end I had to ask the person, why you look so angry at me? I said, I was looking at the board behind you. That is not uncommon today, because we don't differentiate between outside and inside. And this is adding to my understanding of deconstruction. It is not about, as Jordan Peterson says, taking away rationality. It is about getting into what really matters. See differences, making analysis, being intellectual, making categories, understanding deeper, and actually doing what else we call thinking to a better and deeper level. Maybe the only loss could be the word rationality, because it's a cluster word, it's a slaskord, and you just call your whatever you thought, you call that, well, that was rational at least. It didn't succeed, but it was at least rational. Sort of an excuse word. And what I can really recommend, going to YouTube. I'm going to put in a link if Kalle remind me, and that we have Pinker defending rationality. And for you who know anything about linguistics, he should be the last person on this earth to defend rationality. Nothing he says makes any sense. He was the person that said that music is a parasitic element in talk. Singing is unnecessary. Talk about crude divisions. No sane person on this earth would state such a thing. There is even a singing language on the island of La Gomera in the Canary Islands. There already exist singing languages. And we know singing can transfer emotions, but they can make messages clear. Whereas music on the battlefield has been important for ages. Swedish military in the era of the Carolingians refused to go to battle without music, for obvious reasons, because there came the intentions. There came the force to be fractal enough to survive in a battle. Not only as maybe people who only have this crude model will say, it's just an extra thing. No, it's not an extra thing, it's very important. So many testimonies about this. And once more, getting back to this, Kalle mentioned, the Charon, you can also see here, once a fractality is established, for instance, when it comes to military music, we know that music helps us, but once that is established, you can add another level, and that was actually done. What was that level? Well, when all the armies had military music, there was one army who developed a method that was silent. And both for the soldiers in that army and for the one meeting them, that was scary in itself. But it wouldn't have been scary if the other thing weren't established before. It added to the complexity. It didn't take complexity away. The silence was not just a negation sign. It was something fractal and much more. I read testimonies of people meeting this army. Thank God the Swedes never had to do it, but the Austrians did, and that was the Ottoman army. And they wrote, it felt really scary. These people approaching you, and they didn't sing, they didn't have any music, they just came. And that was impressive in itself. But it would not have been impressive maybe in prehistoric time when we didn't use music. Music's been used since at least the Assyrians. So remember this, don't make any preemptive polarities, or I have to tell, this is the negative sign from logic. Could be good to know, I should have told you before. It can also be made this way, but this is better. This is the negative sign. If you do put in the negative sign preemptively in memory, in your fractality, divide things into non-memory and memory. If you're too strict thinking about I should really get rid of all the confabulations in my memory, this is a factor that Matthias Ribbing doesn't mention, and that is made-up memories, which is very common. Kalle would have asked me, what did you have for dinner Saturday? I would confabulate, I would lie. I would say I had probably had some roast or something. Once I put that in, I construct a fractality, and that fractality can meet my real memory, and I can say, no, nicely, I had sausages. That is how memory works. Confabulation is not an exterior part of memory, it's a very important part. And it's been shown that people that confabulate very freely are also very good at discerning true memory from fantasy. Whereas people who preemptively only want to stick to true memories are not very good in discerning whether a memory is true or not. And we know from testimony science that very few people can really tell what happened. And I think that's a modern thing, which is too obsessed about facts. And if we are too obsessed about facts too early, before the deepening of the fractality, that will block out careful and deepen deconstruction of what happened. And there are some people who are excellent in remembering, even when it's something horrendous happening. There was a story a couple of years ago, a person who knew everything about a very complicated robbery in New York. And I would say that then you have a deep level of fractality, that you can meet the situation. Not even the gods could give an accurate description. It was very important because the whole scenario was very complex in the end. And doing this preemptively shuts out complexity. And it's the complexities that we're looking for when we do deconstruction. It's also complexity we look for when we want to remember. And it's also complexity when we want to, shall we take up the next lesson, we'll go to Alexander technique. Because a healthy movement, when I go out of my body, I let my neck free so the head can go forward and upward and my back lengthening and broaden. That is actually much more fractal than walking about like this. It does not have the same sinus curve. Something I found on the net yesterday. It's quite interesting. I already know it's good, but to see it from another angle, to actually understand that scientifically it is better to be upright. Go out of yourself, even though it feels that you lose your balance. Because in the beginning, you're so used to tensing your knees, your hips, your back, your front, your back of your neck, and here in this area. Actually tense now, I can even feel my tension here. If you let the tension go, start up here, loosening up, opening up the chest, going here, letting loose, letting the hips, letting the ankles and the knees. And all of a sudden there is a change in voice as well. And there will be also change in thinking. It becomes more fractal. Because in a way we are a movement. And I think that is one of the reasons we don't have words like prana or ki in our language. And when we use them, we do this rather coarse translation to energy. It is actually something much more complicated. It's the fractality. Because it is fractality that keeps the galaxies together, planets together. And even a simple thing like a ball is kept together by fractality. And in some ways, the ball is an integral part towards the external. It will move in the way I kick it, not because of externality. So we can make a difference all of a sudden. But if we do that difference preemptively before we get into the situation, and we do that too much because it's a level thing here, we will lose out. It's a little bit, the more you put into the bank, the more you will receive when it comes to interest. The less you put into your memory, your planning, your perception, the less you will receive. And the difference will be massive. I already noticed that formerly I had a big problem with disturbances and such stuff. But now that seemed to be such a big problem. But oddly enough, and this is really odd, I can now hear things I couldn't hear before. And that was a surprise, because I thought that other people who didn't get disturbed easily, they blocked hearing out. They don't. They let hearing come in so they can meet it. In the same way we can meet pain, bad memories, good memories for that sake too. You can enjoy a good memory, a memory of a chicken or a swim in the ocean, and still be now, not feeling a loss. So its fractality is going from a losing game, the old model, where you lose in all ends, and you're going to a winning game, where you win in all ends. So Jordan Peterson is absolutely wrong. But I know why he criticizes Derrida. It's not so much because of Derrida, it's the supporters of Derrida. For instance, the Yale School of Literary Criticism. And that is absolutely awful. It is a crude mechanical system for transferring one text to another. It's a renaming process. Who would like that? No one. But that is not true deconstruction. True deconstruction shows that there is a complexity lying beneath, and there is an energy. It's a directedness. And I would say deconstruction can open the eyes up for the modern generation, for the old masters, where there is books, art, architecture, music, all those things. Imagine the wondrous fractality of Bach or Handel. I'm a fan of Handel. If I play Handel to people now, they just say, but it's the same annoying melody going up and down. If you listen to fireworks, for instance. They can't hear that there are at least 12 other melodies underneath. And the whole idea is that the more protruding melody should be repetitious and boring, in order to serve as a canvas for the melodies that's underneath. People can't hear that today. Well, I'm sure as hell, not even I can hear Handel when I put him on the stereo in the car when it's stressed. Even that, I notice it disappears, and I only hear this annoying thing. And actually classical music is very annoying when you're stressed. But if you go down, you realize it's marvelous. And of course it is. Handel is a genius. How can people say it's a monotonous melody when they don't hear the other tones? This is the message of Susie Froebel. We can reach into music once more. It takes training, it takes some patience, but it's a rewarding thing, because this you can bring to all other areas of knowledge. That's the good thing with fractality. It doesn't stop with music, not at all. It goes to all other areas. And it will make other areas even more different, just as in the case with the marsupial and the mammal. You don't lose anything anywhere. There is no loss, just gain in fractality. I say thank you very much, and I wish you a very pleasant afternoon. Bye bye.
Thank you.